Hey everyone, welcome to Damn Fine TV. I'm one of your hosts, Jay.
And I'm Mel's. And in honor of Friday the 13th, we're releasing some of our reviews that were previously only for patrons.
Yes, so today from the Damn Fine TV Patreon Vault, we are bringing you coverage of Pearl. So we hope you enjoy.
And remember, you're a star.
Absolutely. We are here to chat about Pearl, and I'm joined as always by my lovely co host, Mel's.
Hi.
And for the first time ever, we have some very special guests joining us. Although I feel like everybody at the Bookhouse Babes level will know these lovely ladies, but let's introduce them real quick, anyways. Of course, we have Abby from Abby Darling Customs, from Sidetracked Pod with John and Abby.
Thank you. I forgot about that.
Well, I'm here to remind you of one of my
Thank
favorite.
you. Yeah.
So welcome, Abby. And then, of course, Coral of Wholesome Peaks fame. Everybody knows Coral.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome, gals. Thank you for being here. This is exciting. So yeah, like first time we've ever had guests for a Patreon video, but we had been chatting, like we have a group chat and we had been talking about Pearl anyway. And then I think it was Abby that was like, are we going to cover this or what? And then, Mel's and I had already covered X for a Patreon video a couple of months ago, I guess. So we kind of always knew we'd chat about Pearl. We wanted the gals to come on and help us out. So I guess we'll maybe kick things off with like some overall thoughts, but I kind of want to get just like a general temperature check first. So if we could say like one word, whether it's like, love, dislike, something, we'll go around like the Zoom room and just say our one word. I can kick us off. I'll say like. Mel's.
I'm going to say, terrifying.
Oh.
Oh, was I supposed to say
can't wait
like?
to hear about
I'm
this.
sorry.
Well,
Did I not listen to the instructions?
I want to know more like where your feelings on it are.
Oh,
so
love.
Terrified of it, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. I love this film. So yeah. Okay.
Okay, Abby.
I'm gonna go with like a strong like, not quite love.
Yeah.
Strong like.
And Coral.
Like charmed by it,
Ooh.
fascinated, but
I
not
really
love.
like that one.
I really like that. Okay, well, Mel's, tell us why you love it then.
Okay, well, it's just very haunting, and I love. I don't want to. I keep wanting to call it like horror noir, and it's really not, but it gives me that feeling, and I love those types of horror films. So, like, Nightmare Alley. I know we're not talking about that, but like that's definitely a horror noir, and I get the same feeling of just like the cinematography, the color palette, like everything about it. And honestly, I just loved having a backstory for Pearl. I mean, did it leave a little to desire at the end? Yes, but I'm not going to let that affect like the overall feeling that I had throughout the entire film, which is that I was enthralled. Like Pearl said, I was fascinated. I mean, I said I was terrified too, because it would, it started off just little things, and you're like, okay, well that's odd, and then escalates. So but yes, it's a love for me, just simply because I love these types of horror films.
Okay, gotcha. When is Nightmare Alley from?
Okay, so Nightmare Alley is Guillermo del Toro.
Oh.
Yes, I Duolingo, so didn't know if you knew that. Anyway, it's got Bradley Cooper in it, and it's really about the carnival scene, and
Okay.
so it's just that type of, I mean, there's no blood and guts. Now, y'all know I love slashers, my all-time favorite, but like I really enjoy these types of horror films too, where it's really story focused, and there are just elements of horror in there. It's not like very thrown in your face type thing, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. No, I'm glad that you explained that. Okay. Coral, you're charmed. Why are you charmed?
Okay, so when I had seen the previews for Pearl, I had not seen X and I had not seen any previews for X before.
Okay.
So I had a pass to see a bunch of movies at Alamo Drafthouse, and I had seen the preview for Pearl so many times. And I was like, this movie looks amazing. I loved the Technicolor, I loved the cinematography. And I feel like it lived up to my expectations of what I had seen in the previews before having seen X. But I didn't love it because a lot of what Mel's was saying, after seeing X, it didn't live up to my expectations of what I wanted to learn about Pearl. But it was a beautiful movie overall.
I think I'm right there with you, Coral. Like, there's so much more that I want to know about Pearl that I thought we would get. And I was really hoping that my feelings and my thoughts would be a little more full and there by the time we actually got to this discussion, because since leaving the theater, I haven't really known how I feel about this movie. I know I really love Mia Goth. I think she carried this whole thing. Yes, the color palette is gorgeous. The cinematography is out of this world. The editing, I mean, Ty West's ability to bring us to a time and a place is incredible. I don't really know who else is doing that as well. And then Mia Goth, like carrying this whole thing. I'm charmed by her. I'm fascinated by her. I could watch her probably paint a wall, honestly. I know people say that about a lot of things, but she's so captivating in whatever she's doing. But I left the theater really not knowing if that's what I had wanted. It's certainly wasn't what I had expected or anticipated. And I still don't know. Like, I'm glad, Mel's, that you brought up this idea of like it having horror elements and it being a particular type of horror, because I'm also still unsure. Like, I don't know that this is horror for me.
Mhm.
Like, it definitely has those horror elements. There's parts that make you feel uncomfortable and it gets under your skin a little bit, but it feels more like a dramatic character piece
Yeah.
with horror elements, and that doesn't make it a bad movie. I just don't know that that's what I wanted. So that's why I say like, there's so many things to like about it, but not that we're comparing it, but it's no X. Like, X
Right.
is all-time fave, fantastic, but yeah. Okay, Abby, tell us your strong like reasons.
I think you just like covered a lot of the way I feel as
Yeah.
well. Like I loved it for all of the things that everyone else has said, right? Like it is visually stunning, but I was in the same boat. Like I had just I guess I watched X when X came out. And I knew that I wanted to see this one in the theater, but like life got in the way and it just kept like pushing. And I finally was able to see it at like one of our like indie cinemas here on its last night showing. And I saw it
Oh,
by
wow.
myself, which means that, of course, like that final monologue, I was like a little dozy because it was like the late show, which is very unfortunate. But I agree with you. Like I'm so happy I saw it in the theater for all of the beauty and like for the weirdness and being able to sort of like pick up that weirdness with the crowd, like how uncomfortable all of us were feeling in a very different way from the discomfort that we all felt during X. But I think like, I left being like, this is not, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's not what I don't even want to say not what I thought. It's just not giving me everything. And the other thing that really like again, I tried to see it, as soon as it came out and I just couldn't. But that meant then that I was like hearing what other people thought of it. And the amount of people that love horror and love like slashers and like gory and saying this was their favorite movie of the year, I think that got in my head. Like, so
Oh,
at the end of it, I was like, what the hell? What did we watch the same movie? Like, this was very different from what I thought it was going to be, and not in a bad way.
yeah.
But yeah, like I was just very surprised by the response that it got from people that love, like traditional, we'll say traditional, which whatever the hell that means, but traditional horror slasher. And yeah. So that's my strong like.
Yeah. Well, and when I say I don't know if it's horror, I don't mean to like yeah, I don't want to like gatekeep horror in any way or like
Oh.
Right.
be the official stance on what makes horror, but I think we can all have our own opinions on what kind of horror is really going to do it for us. And maybe this just wasn't
Absolutely.
it for me, but there was something you said that I was going to pick. Oh, I'm also very surprised that so many people that are really into slashers have said that this is the best of the year when we have something like X out there. Like, okay, again, we're not meant to be comparing it, but Mel's,
Yeah.
you're the sole love in the group here. What did you like it more than X, or do you think it's more slasher-esque than X, or
No, I mean, X is definitely a slasher, but I think for me, to be honest, because I was sitting here thinking about like, well, what is it that I, aside from what I said, obviously, but like, what is that real love for this rooted in? Hearing everybody else talk, and I truly think that in terms of Pearl being the prequel to X, it being a different time period, maybe that's why I just try not to actually compare, like I'm not comparing the two, if that makes sense. So like I love X for like what X is, but after I saw Pearl, I recognized, I guess for me, Pearl just being in a different category than X. Does that make sense? So like we're used to like prequels or sequels where the horror elements or the themes of the horror tend to carry on, right? Like Freddy
right?
Krueger, they're all basically the
Yeah.
same. He's getting your ass in your dreams, So I appreciated, I think, the fact that it's probably a gamble, and that's why I think a lot of people came out of that movie being like, this is totally not what I expected, and I don't know if that's what I want out of it. But I think it is because it was just meant to be a totally different uh type of film. And I don't know, am I making sense? Like I
Yeah.
also thought about the way it was shot and the fact that she was so isolated. I know we'll probably get into more of these themes, but also that would in my mind give me another way into being okay with it being something totally different than what X was, with more characters, if that makes sense. Like we had just such
Yeah.
it just being focused on Pearl only in her very small life, not to be shady, but yeah. So
Yeah. No, and
I
I think
think that
like go ahead, Abby.
Oh, I was just gonna say, just to sort of, extend what I was saying, what Mel's is saying. It was also the time that it was released, like the fact that it was released right in Halloween season. I was
right.
expecting something totally different, and I kind of love that it made me step out of that like
Yes.
box that I was expecting. And I think really like the horror community and like Halloween horror lovers like had to sort of say, oh, okay, well this is really, yeah, this is really different. And a lot of people were on board with it. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Another thing that it did do, like, even though I don't fully still know how I feel about it or like where to categorize it or what to do with it, I haven't stopped thinking about it in a very similar way that I didn't stop thinking about X. And maybe it is because it feels so like confounding to me. And so in and of itself, like that's kind of a masterpiece in a way. Like if you can keep people thinking about your film for whatever reason, I feel like that's part of the point. And like I'm even that much more excited for the third movie in the franchise because I think that will also do something else with our expectations that I don't know how to expect for, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and I think as a franchise, it's going to be I think it's going to be a classic just in terms of what it's doing with horror, with filmmaking. Like, I really don't know where else this is happening. So
Mhm.
in terms of
Yeah.
that, like, yeah. Um, well, I don't know if there's any more overall thoughts from anybody, but we could get into some of those themes like Mel's you already brought up, like
Mhm.
the idea of being so isolated and
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't grow up in a small rural town like that. Like I was in a small southern rural town, but I mean, definitely not like Pearl was living, obviously, and I wasn't living during the Spanish influenza days either. Okay, so which I find it
But you
very
did live through a pandemic.
well. I know, and I was about to
We're
say,
living in a pandemic. Yeah.
yeah. And one thing that was just so like we were talking about the timing of it, and then also like when X was released, and then when this was released. I mean, we're kind of, I guess, slowly coming out of. We're supposedly coming out of COVID times. I don't really know what that means, but when I say that is like, places are open now and people are going and doing things.
Sure.
And for this to be taking place during the Spanish influenza, I was like as soon as she put that mask on, like for the first time, I was like, no, PTSD. No, I'm just kidding. No, but like the isolation, they're like, and that's maybe something. And another reason why I love it so much is it felt super relatable, because there would be times where we wouldn't leave our house like on the weekends, right? Because it takes so long to get into town or whatever it may be. So, you're looking in the span of time with her, right? And it's just her and a not well dad and a mom that's probably like obviously pretty bitter about it, a husband that's off in the war. She's very young. So I don't know, like it was just, I found the isolation very compelling, also that it was during the influenza times. And I mean, we did lockdown and isolation for COVID. I don't know, like maybe there was just a lot of real life parallels like running in.
Sorry to interrupt. I think like when it came to, because I was the same, when that mask went on, I was just like, oh my God, because I'm not great with history. Like I'm not great with dates. So I knew it was 1918, but that didn't click. But then as soon as she put the mask on and her mom said, wear your mask, I'm like, oh yeah, shit, this is a pandemic too. Right. And it's interesting that sort of adds to the horror. Like I'm piecing this together in my brain right now, so I don't know how clear I will be, but it's sort of like, as we say, this is stuck with us, and we do categorize this as a horror. And I think that has so much to do with the fact that we've all lived through this horrifying event together, and to know that just as you say, the relatability, but that recognition that this is scary, like that she's even, for her mother, like it's scary that she went to this movie theater, and that's the truth for a lot of people, right? That's terrifying that they would even go to somewhere so public. And yeah, I just think it's like this meta something where we're all sitting there thinking this is what we're living through currently, right? Like it's wild.
And not that I ever expected it to be like overdone or anything, but I think we saw so much media that tapped into the COVID of it all, and this really was just like very subtle in a way, but still evoked that feeling of fear. And somehow Ty West and Mia Goth knew that the 70s was about to come back, but also that we could connect in with 1918 in the same year. Incredible.
Love it.
I'll say it added to the horror for me, because I only go to the movies when I can check and see how many people are there, and there's not a lot of people. And the woman, she ended up being like 2 rows ahead of us, started coughing right during the scene in the movie theaters. And so I think that's what really made Pearl such a horror movie for me, because I was scared for my life the entire time I was watching it.
Yeah,
but that's such a good point, right? Like this is literally, we're all sitting in a theater during a pandemic watching this, or I should say, at least I was. Anyone that saw it in the theater, it's wild, that connection that our mind makes, and remembering these last 3 years, right? It only adds to, I think, like this, I know we'll touch on it more, but it only adds to the understanding of Pearl's actions, of her mother's actions, of the frustrations, of so many of the things that happen.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go into that then, because so watching it again, I watched it again today just to refresh my memory. And I think the first time seeing it, I sympathized a little more with Pearl. And on my second watch, I really didn't as much. There was a part of me that felt some sympathy for her. But this second time through, I was like, can you please listen to your mother? Like, sweetie, I mean, it's a pandemic. You guys don't have that much money. Like, there was so much about Pearl that I was just like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is why I don't want children. Like, I just can't. they're so selfish. Like, so
Give us the list. We know.
Mhm.
okay. But Abby, you started getting into like it helps to make sense of Pearl's motivations. So or some of the actions that she takes. So let's expand on that if you have anything to add. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Oh my goodness. I didn't rewatch it, so I don't. You know what I keep thinking about though? That damn stew that mom makes. It looks so
Yeah.
good.
All the food that she makes actually does look really good.
I know.
I would
And
eat
I
it.
agree. Like that was something that I actually said to a friend at the end after I watched it and we were chatting about it, is that I found that I identified more with her mother by the end of maybe not the end, by the middle of the film, where it's like I know that Pearl's isolation is not just the pandemic. It's not just where she's
Right.
living. It's that, you know, it's this mother that seems overbearing, or at least at the very beginning seems overbearing, a father that she's sort of chained to because she is the sole provider while her mother, like, I don't know, makes the stew and tills the field, whatever she does. The husband's away,
The
right?
lead.
So right? So like I think she's trying so hard to escape this isolation, which we can connect to. But yeah, I don't know that I still I don't know what the motivations are. And I think that's where like I want to watch it again because is it fame? Is it connection? Is it sex? Like we know that she's
Mhm.
interested in sex and sexuality. And the one thing that I didn't remember was that and maybe Jasmine, you'll be the first to like know this answer after rewatching so recently. There's that moment where we learn that her husband has like a heart condition, so they can't have sex.
Oh yeah, so that's an X.
Oh, right. Okay, that's why I really didn't remember. And so, you know, yeah,
Yeah,
now
because I mean,
I've lost my train of thought.
we basically get nothing from the husband in Pearl, which I think was
Right.
surprising to me on first watch. But I guess it's called Pearl. So we're here to learn about Pearl and not really
Mhm.
what Pearl and Howard have been up to. But yeah, I mean, he comes home at that final scene and then presumably they've been fucking and killing people till the
Ever
70s.
since.
I don't
Mhm.
know. Like,
Woo.
yeah. Would love to know how she got him on board. That's something that I felt was missing that I would have wanted to know.
That's the thing I wish the most in the movie is that we got more Howard for sure.
Mhm.
Or like at least a little bit of something. But
Well, maybe he didn't like his sister. And when he found out, he was like, you know what, Pearl, thank you.
thank you
Okay,
so much.
she's been giving me fish sandwiches my whole life. I don't like it. Um, yeah, so it's funny you say about like sympathizing with her because like I don't ever really had like sympathy for Pearl. Like even I've only seen it once and I watched some recap like videos today just to refresh my mind of certain scenes and whatnot. But I don't think I sympathize with her, but I just found it relatable, like her age. And then I started thinking to myself, I mean, I got married young, but not that young. And my husband never went off to the war. And all of these, just all of her circumstances, like you were talking about, Abby,
Sure.
just like, you know what I mean? And so I'm like, well, she's going to be a little immature. Obviously, I'm not talking about the killing part. Like, I didn't never experience that. But you know, as far as like just what as far as the isolation and then the relationship with the mother and all, you know, the sympathy with Pearl, like as far as that goes, it's just very interesting because yeah, by the end of the film, I was like, well, I guess I kind of just get why you went on this path you went on. I mean, it's just, you know, something snapped and it was like, I'm done with it. So I don't know. I mean, the most I can relate to that is like when I had first got my driver's license and I was like, fuck you, mom, I'm out of here. And I went and got like a blizzard from Dairy Queen. Like I thought I was being so rebellious. Like I wasn't out
So
stabbing
similar.
people.
That is so similar to putting a pitchfork through a man's face.
I know. So I'm like, well,
And one.
6 and 1. Yeah, I think this is pretty relatable. So,
See, when I got my driver's license, I drove out into a cornfield and I mounted a scarecrow. So I kind of
Oh,
relate
there
to
we
Pearl in
go.
that way.
There we go.
You know what? You brought it full circle, and I'm loving it.
That is such an interesting scene. Like I don't know. It some of it has to be her age, her particular situation, her lack of education, right? Education in general, but also
Mhm.
sexual education. But it's so funny to me. Well, funny, not haha, but like
Right.
interesting, funny that she is like making out with this scarecrow, and then she imagines the projectionist's face, and she's like, "I'm married," as if this inanimate object has been the one to like come on to her. It's
Right.
just it's very interesting in that moment.
Yeah, that scene was something else. Yeah. So I don't know. Like, this was one of the points though in the film, I'm not gonna lie, where I was like, okay, like, I don't know. Is it like a dead body under there that she's like put out there?
Right.
So I will
Same,
say
yeah.
that was one of the moments of like I had a lot of heightened anticipation. And I was like, oh, she's just gonna double click the mouse to this? Well, I mean, would I see a dead body? I mean, come on.
It was
Yeah, I
really
agree.
good at building suspense and
Yes.
tension in that way, because I feel
Yeah.
like there was a lot of moments like that that felt like they were leading somewhere
Mhm.
that they clearly didn't,
Right.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
still like heightened the feeling, I think.
Uh-huh.
Mhm. I thought that scene was gonna be some kind of huge turning point, and
Right.
it kinda, I mean, she took the hat? Is
Yeah.
that like, that was pretty much that's what I got out of it. She brought the hat home. It felt like perhaps some kind of awakening, right? And that
Yeah.
hat came home with her, and that's when she's like, "Fuck you, mom, I'm wearing the hat," if that even happens. I just know that she kept the hat,
Yeah.
right?
But she
Yeah.
hid it, I
Um,
think. Or
Well, her
What
mom
did
is
she do?
convinced that it's probably full of either the germs, or if
That's
she's
right.
lucky, just mice. So
right.
yeah.
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 So I mean, that is kind of, oh, I don't know the right word for it. Allegory, metaphor, symbolism, whatever, of, whatever Pearl took home with her from
Mhm.
that encounter with the scarecrow, and her mother telling her, like basically shaming her, but
Mhm.
thinking
Yeah.
it's the flu and not really having to do with sex. But
Yeah.
I want to talk more about like Pearl's sort of lack of access, and just in general the lack of access that women would have had at this time. But I want to circle back to one thing first, talking about the sympathy for Pearl. Did you gals feel sympathy for Pearl in X?
I did. I will go ahead and tell
Mm.
you. I think we talked about it on our
Yeah.
video.
I
Where
think
I
we
was
said it was
like,
complicated, right? Like she's obviously a murderer, but we did feel for her.
yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And you know what would be interesting? And I'm sorry, I'll let our guests go after this. Would be interesting though to immediately watch X again after Pearl and see if my
Right.
feelings have changed, because it's funny, I'm sympathetic to her. I don't know if it's the age or what in X, right? Like, I'm more sympathetic to her when she's obviously infinity and beyond. What am I looking for?
Mhm.
Infinitely like worse so many years down the
Right.
road, right?
Yes. Yes.
So it's interesting, like I felt no sympathy for her after seeing Pearl. I'd like to watch them back to back and see if my view changes, because I haven't rewatched.
Or if it
X.
changes as you watch.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry, Abby Coral. I just, that popped in my head and I was like, I got to get it out now or it's gonna.
Yes. Yeah. So Coral, did you have sympathy for Pearl in X or in Pearl?
I did for both. But I think I'm probably with both of you on that. I feel guilty almost about feeling sympathy because she is an evil murderer.
Yeah.
But there's so much emphasis on the importance of beauty and desirability as a woman that it's easy to watch X and feel bad for Pearl and know where she's coming from. Obviously, none of us are going to go murder someone over it, but it's easy to understand Pearl in both movies. I think in X, we understand the desirability aspect. And in Pearl, I understand living through a pandemic and being really frustrated that I can't live my life. Obviously didn't murder a bunch of people over it. But I've been in both situations and I get it. And so I think that's something that's really beautiful about both of these movies is that it's very relatable for a
Yeah.
horror movie.
I love that, Coral.
Yeah. Yeah, those were great points.
Yeah, I think for me, like the sympathy that I feel, I feel more sympathetic towards Pearl in X. But for me, it's more based on age and how age isolates. And so like we can circle back to that because I loved where Jasmine was sort of going with the oh my gosh, where were we going? Oh, with
I
her
almost
with her
forgot too,
youth.
but
and-
the
I
education.
know.
Yeah.
Going to
Right?
South
Yeah.
Texas.
Right, because I do I think that that plays into age as well, but that was I was reading an article on Collider and it just like I was like, oh, this like really connected the two for me because I think that age can be so isolating.
Mm.
And I guess that does connect to Pearl and her education. It's very isolating when you're young and you don't really understand the world, but she's clearly been thrown into this situation where she's been made a wife and we don't find out why. I guess she's back with her parents because her husband is at war.
I think so. And like helping out on
Yeah.
the farm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that and her dad.
Well, that's my assumption. I don't really know
Right.
if they actually, well, Jasmine, you probably know. I don't know if they actually come right out and say though, right?
Well, so it's during that monologue at the end where she's telling Howard, but it's actually Howard's sister, all about who she really is. Excuse me. And you realize that Howard wanted a simpler life. He came from money. He came from this, he came from money and he came from
Mhm.
more privilege, but he wanted a simpler life. And so he actually wanted to work on, I almost called her Maxine, on Pearl's farm. And so
Okay.
that's why they were there. And I assumed that, yes, she was also there to help take care of her father. But she she kind of latched on to Howard because she thought he was a bit of a ticket out of the farm because he came from money and because he had all this privilege, but he didn't want any of that. And then he wanted to be, the good American and join the war and all of that. So that's kind of why she's stuck there essentially.
Okay.
So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think this like lack of education and access is also something that we see in X. And I know we're talking a lot about X, but for me, it feels almost impossible to separate the two films. Like they feel like they go completely hand in hand in a discussion like this. But I can't remember how I exactly worded it, but Mel's, this was a text I sent to you that was like, it all feels like a cautionary tale about the lack of access that we get to, whether it's sexual education or reproductive rights, because I'm not saying that all women that don't get these, or all people that identify as women, all people that have, uteruses, let's say, whatever, we're not all going to go and murder because we don't have a better education, but it does feel cautionary in terms of like, look what happens when we don't give access to people and we don't properly educate people. Like they get all of these terrible ideas around shaming themselves and not fully being themselves, that the repression ends up blowing up in these really murderous ways in these movies, which horror always does that, right? It takes like the situation and kind of exaggerates it to make a point. But
Yeah.
That's all I really wanted to say about that. I don't know if anybody wants to build
I wanted to just build on the idea like around the shame and sexuality and that lack of access and how she is not thrown into it necessarily, but then it sort of snowballs into the murderous rage. And in both films, and I'm very interested for Maxine, there's also that element of fame, right? The notion of fame and the pictures and that connection of like of sex work. I guess maybe that's not really part of it, but I should say like pornography.
Yeah.
All of that connects, and it almost seems cautionary in that sense too, where there's this I don't know, this sort of caution towards fame doesn't have to come with all of these things. It can, but you shouldn't expect it if you just, I guess, throw yourself into it. Like thinking again more with X, like I don't know how to, I'm just, you sort of got me thinking there, Jasmine, and I don't have that again fully fleshed out at all. But I think there is a lot to connect between the element of fame and the theme of fame, and I don't know, her
Mhm.
lack of access, her innocence, and the fact that none of that took it away, right? Like when she watched those the movies with the projectionist, like she was already well on her way. Those didn't turn her. It wasn't
Right.
pornography that turned her
Yeah. Yeah.
into a murderer, nor was that the case in well, I guess it was the case in X. But I mean, yeah, it's something that I can't wait to see how it plays out in Maxine, because
Right.
they have to pick up on it, right? Like the element of sexuality. But I think it's set in Hollywood, right? We're set in Hollywood.
I think
Is
so.
that-
Yeah,
think it
like
is going
1980s
Yeah.
Hollywood. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the perfect place to bring it to as well, because I think the bigger picture too is saying something about filmmaking, fame, show business, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So this is wildly probably off topic. It's about Pearl though, so it's on topic.
Okay, so it's-
I'm really starting. Oh gosh, I really wish I had come home and watched X after I watched Pearl. And y'all are probably, this is probably gonna be another one of those moments where I'm like, hey, guess what? This is the beginning of Fire Walk with Me starts with a light, and the end of The Return ends with one. I just figured out Twin Peaks. Okay, so this might be another one of those moments. Now seeing Pearl and her fascination with fame and wanting to make it, but also seeing quote unquote dirty films at the theater. Well, how does that shape what happens in X when they come out there to film a movie that, I mean, she had interest in that. I mean, I think that was the first time she had seen something like that in Pearl, but I mean, she went back and it kind of, I think she was realizing, oh, like this is it for me, right? And also the projectionist telling her, you couldn't be famous and do, this type of film, and you don't have to go to the church and try out for the Junior Miss League or whatever. But so do you see where I'm going? Like the through line for the fact that I guess maybe they didn't know they were going to make a pornographic film, but it seems like it should have been maybe an obvious. And so knowing this about Pearl now and Howard obviously being on board as we saw through X, like, was that also a motivation for her? Like, not just these are younger, prettier girls that are able to be sexually active with a partner, things that she's obviously missing in life, but that they're also pursuing something that she was kind of obsessed with.
For sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I think it
Mhm.
was. And one reason is that what was his name? He played RJ, and the projectionist had the same death.
Oh gosh.
And they were the two of the most similar, but they both got the pitchfork through the eye. They had
Yeah,
almost the same exact death.
Right.
And I think that
Yeah.
she killed him that way on purpose, because he seemed to be the only one that wasn't really like doing anything when she killed him.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like he wasn't bothering her. He didn't reject her. He was just kind of hiding out in the barn, and she pitchforked him through the eyes. And I think it's because he reminded her of the projectionist.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's an
Okay, so wait,
interesting point.
which one were you talking about, RJ or the projectionist? Because I did want to talk about the projectionist more too.
Both of them. They had the same, they both got pitchforked through the eye
In each movie.
in each movie.
I think it's remember RJ gets like bashed in front of the car. And
I'm on the
brother follows
Wikipedia
her.
right now, and I'm looking at, so it's either Wayne or RJ, and they look exactly alike. You know
Wayne gets
what? Yeah,
pitchforked.
it is.
Yeah.
It is Wayne. It is Wayne, and I had
Oh.
my cursor on his name and I had the other one accidentally highlighted. That was the
It's
problem.
okay. I'm
It was
really
way-
Wow.
Thank
know
you.
it all at this point, because
No,
I've
thank
seen
you for
it,
that.
like too many times and just watched Pearl today. So it's all there. So
No, thank you for correcting me before someone in the comments did. You're
Oh,
right.
no,
It
you're
was
fine.
right.
No,
I
thank
and I
you.
had it all put up because I was so excited to say this.
Well,
and
look at me. I
But
was
it's
like, oh my
still,
God,
it's
you're
a
so
great
right.
point. Yeah, same. But I think
yeah, I think regardless, the through line with the similar killing styles still is, I still think, meant to evoke something between both films, regardless of who it is. Yeah. Sorry, Abby, you were gonna say something.
oh no, I don't know what I was gonna say. I'm
Um,
good.
The projectionist, though, I was gonna ask you guys if you had favorite moments, and Coral bringing up the projectionist just totally reminded me of one of my favorites, is when she kills the projectionist and she has this moment, like he has obviously realized, oh, I've fucked a crazy girl. Time for me to get out of here. No, like it's not you, girl, it's me. Like I have to go project
Right.
this film.
Oh,
Like
you
no
know
big
what?
deal. See you
Kind of
soon.
appointment. Yeah.
Oh, when will I see you? It's just an expression. Like, don't worry about it. But what do you guys make of that? Like, she's freaking out. She's like, what did I do wrong? If I didn't do anything wrong, why are you leaving? I feel so I feel so captivated by that moment, but I'm not sure that I like fully get it for some reason. Does
I'm
anybody
a
fully get it?
same. I know that I agree with you. I'd say that's my favorite moment as well, because I
Okay.
felt all the emotions, right? Like it is kind of funny. It is kind of funny. It's also absolutely like heartbreaking, anxiety inducing. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I've been in that position where I'm like, wait, what did I do wrong? What didn't we just
Yes.
like do that?
Yes.
And now you're here. And what did I do wrong? But also that internal like feeling that, oh yeah, I did do a few things that would be like kind of red flaggy.
That defensive
And
is coming up. Yeah.
right. But it's also that like it's playing back into that idea, I think, of our questioning around sex and sexuality, because how can it not be? We know that he really liked being around her 24 hours before, whatever, however many hours, and she knew that. And it just once again, like there's these sort of like the separation of what is like good sex, what is bad sex, what is right sex, what is wrong sex, and I don't know how to fully formulate it, but that was all of the stuff that made me really like that moment, because in that moment I hated him, but I also wasn't really on her side either.
Right.
But it was all after like this sort of regular sex, especially when we think back to X, right? And like what people deem this more like deviation from a sort of typical sex life or sex, I don't know, pattern, whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I don't fully get it yet, but I love all of the possible comments on it, because I think that it really does elevate all forms of sexuality. And I don't know. I hope someone else can pick up on this and really do it for me, because I don't know.
No, I mean, I think yeah, I mean, you're raising really good points, and those are good things that I think I will take to a rewatch, to be honest. Like, you know what I mean? Like taking that and reformulating thoughts after, a rewatch will be very interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Coral, I'm also thinking back to your projectionist with the pitchfork and Wayne. It still very much works because RJ was making the film, but Wayne was like directing the film and was still behind the lens. The projectionist does not make the film, he's behind the lens, so it actually still very much works. And that was like going on in my brain, sorry, as Abby was talking.
I wish I had looked it up. Someone had pointed out online that they had said, there's a line that the both of them said that are very similar to each other that I think may have.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to look it up, and if I
Mhm.
find it, I will bring it up.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to say, I know I cut my camera off twice, but it's because it's like glitching a little bit. So to all the
I
Bookhouse babes,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just trying to like reset it. So,
That's okay.
you know, we don't have another fiasco like the last camera I had where it was like, all stuff.
We had so
Um,
many cool glitchies from that though.
I mean, yeah, I know. Yeah. Very frustrating though.
But anyway, I love her outburst at him in that moment. I think it's one of those moments that kind of captures everything Mia Goth is doing in the movie in a quick moment. Not a quick moment, but in very quick succession. It's very sad, it's very desperate, it's very horrifying, it's very young and naive, and then again, like very scary, because she turns that into, nobody is going to stop me from what I want to do. Not you, not my mom. And it's like, this anger is so misplaced. Like, he literally would have left and like said nothing of her ever again. Like, he was no
Mhm.
threat, but she perceived him in that way. And that's another one of those things where I feel like her isolation, lack of understanding of the world has all come together and like really twisted her understanding of people
Mhm.
and social interactions. But
Mhm.
it's, that for me was also a big moment. Like, I'm pretty sure at this point she had already tried to save her mother from burning by throwing a boiling pot of water on her.
Mhm.
But
Potatoes.
I think it was corn and potatoes,
Oh,
which is
okay.
a funny image though of throwing that like pot of boiling water on her. But then the way that she attacks him as if this man is going to get in her way, there's something really chilling about that kind of stays on my mind. So
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
why I really wanted to bring up the projectionist. But
Well, I
I'm gonna
wonder
jump
if-
in and
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
go right ahead.
sorry.
I'm sorry. No, please.
Oh, it's Wayne. So it's not the projectionist. It's Wayne says that Maxine has the X factor, and then the judges say that Maxine
yeah.
that Pearl does not have the X factor. So that's the line.
Right.
But that has nothing to do with the similarities between the two. But they are, manager, that whole thing.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Casting, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. I also wonder if there was like, it was definitely misplaced anger towards the projectionist, but it also makes me wonder if she had somehow in her mind, like, I know he took her home, like, and then things got weird or whatnot. Weird. But I think there was a lot of misplaced anger there too, because she thought it would be a ticket out. And it's just so funny,
Yes.
peculiar, not funny, haha. Fun and peculiar that she goes on to do all these things with Howard, right? But she was ready to go in an instant. So like, yeah, there's that chunk of time, like where we in Pearl, right? And when we see them in X, where, like I mentioned at the top, it's left to be desired. And those are the kind of things that I want to know, because it's like, yeah, in her mind, even though she had the revelation where she was like, I should listen to my mama, X, Y, and Z or whatever. I still think it's interesting that in that moment, though, it was when she was also like, and also I guess I'll just be fine with Howard. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, but I feel like that's that immaturity level of her being so young anyway, and not educated, which this wasn't odd for that time with women, right? So it's
Yeah.
a great
Mhm.
depiction. Yeah, when we see her later, for her to be so like, all right, well, we're the husband-wife killing duo, and let's get it on, let's rumble, they're ready to go.
Another kind of fine duo.
Yeah, exactly.
You're so right though, because the projectionist is the one that brought up this idea of going to Europe once the pandemic
Right.
is over. And so that was another, I think, to her, a ticket out of there. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think it probably just bowled up inside of her, right? And then obviously after what
She
happens
threw that water right on her mom. Boiled up and she threw it right.
Well, I mean, bless her heart, but that was that was great for me. I enjoyed that imagery of this like burnt up person. I know I'm so sick and twisted, but
It
the
was
effects
so
and
good though.
stuff
The
was so
idea
good.
that the idea that Pearl really in her heart actually was trying to help, but she made the situation so much worse.
Worse. Yeah.
Somehow, like it's so tragic, but so funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes.
There was a lot of moments in this movie that made me laugh where I think it's kind of like a dark comedy in a sense, or like it's a horror comedy in a weird
Mhm.
way, or yeah. That conversation though between her and her mom, where things go to that boiling point,
Oh,
is like that's one of those scenes that you call like a master class in acting.
Mhm.
we're laughing because you said boiling point, and
Yes,
you know.
yeah. But just these two
Uh,
actresses feeding off of each other, and I
yeah,
mean
it was great.
everything.
It was a
Yeah.
great scene.
And this,
And-
I'm going
oh.
to take things in a totally different direction. Sorry,
ahead.
Coral, because this, you all might just be like, all right, that's enough. I just realized, like, Pearl sort of gets all of her gumption when she wears her mother's dresses, right?
Yes.
So
I mean, she loves to
does
wear
this,
them and dance around, and it makes her feel
yeah,
more confident and older. And
right? And so is this some kind of tie-in? Is her mom so hard on her because her mother was, like, I don't know, her mother was also aspiring to be in show business or a fancy gal in some way? Like, I don't know. I just thought of
I
that.
like that. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And, hopefully maybe that's going to be number 4. Maybe we learn about whatever her name was. I can't remember.
Oh, well,
Know what her name was. Yeah.
I can't remember. Just
German.
mother,
Yeah.
mother dear.
Sorry, Coral, I cut you off.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm pretty sure the actress that plays Pearl's mother did the stunts for X and just stuck around and learned German.
Oh, really?
Just for the movie. But I'm on her IMDb and it seems like she does do some acting. So I don't know where I got that.
See, this is why we don't
Oh,
Google.
like
This is I'm telling you, you either better get to the ER or you know the trivia's wrong.
Oh no, she was the intimacy coordinator on X and then was offered the
nice.
role.
Oh,
Yeah.
So she was in
wow.
production. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and she learned German just for the role. So
See, that's awesome.
Wow.
whoa, I would
Yeah.
not have guessed that. I would
Me
have thought that
either.
was a native tongue for her, for
Mhm.
sure.
right.
Wow. That was also an interesting layer, the fact that they were German, and it was
Mhm.
I mean, it was also a very difficult time to be German in America.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think there's so many little sprinklings, right? Where, like, I have written down, like, TUS he doesn't shove anything down our throats, but there are so many little things that I think are meant to be super rich if you want to take the time and talk about them.
Mhm.
Um,
I
but they're
agree.
also easy to just take sort of at face value that this is, oh, they're okay, German farm, whatever. But I agree with you. There's something really big there. And it's just, yeah, part of what gives this movie that like extra feeling. Like I didn't love it, but I've thought about it a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Because it does just add to the reason that they would feel so isolated and the reason that her
Mhm.
mother would be extra protective. And yet the idea of being that kind of outsider also has so many avenues and pathways that could be explored.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
go
I
ahead,
was just
Mel.
well, are we talking about sorry, I know because we kind of veered off a little bit. Were we gonna talk about like favorite moments? Because I
That's what
have
I was just gonna say is why don't
okay.
we do some other
All
fave
right.
moments? Yeah. So dive
Well,
right in.
Sure. So I have 2. One of them is I'm sorry, it's probably not meant to be funny, but there was so much, and I'm not even gonna say it was funny, but like I guess for me saying it was a favorite moment, it was very suspenseful. This is where I talk about being terrified. Was when she was just dancing around, smothering her dad. And I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is unsettling.
Yeah.
But it's one that I still often, it will pop up in my mind, and it just like Pearl smothering her dad dancing around. I was like, oh, you pop back in my head. The other favorite moment was that last, or one of the last scenes there, when Howard comes home and he sees
Mm-hmm.
the what is happening with Pearl, right? But there was something so this is probably weird to everybody too, but something so beautiful in my opinion about seeing her trying to be what her mom had been or like, you know, like who she had been running away from in so many ways, right? But with corpses and rotted food, and like, so that was like the demise of like everything was so bountiful and pretty, as pretty as it could be. Like we talked about how good the food looked, you know, and it was like aesthetically pleasing to see all this nice fresh food and etc. For Howard to come home and see her in this much disarray and all of that, like that's another haunting image that I have in my mind sometimes. It's just like her being like, here's this pig that your mom and sister dropped off, like what? And that's why I named myself the carnivore with a meat problem, because I was like, this is disgusting. Like
but it
Jasmine
looks
and
gorgeous.
No, I'm talking about when it was rotting outside.
Oh,
but
and the color palette makes it pop.
Well,
it's
sure.
so nice.
Those rich browns and grays really made it pop up the screen. No.
The yellow of the maggots. Come on.
Stop! I'm getting hungry. No. But I think Jasmine, you and I have talked about this. Like, we find it hilarious that you're vegan and I'm not. But like when we talked about the Red Tide, and I was like, I can't watch this because of the meat getting ground up. And you're like, that's great. Like, this makes me laugh because I'm sitting here complaining about this rotting pig out there when I would think it would be, if I didn't eat meat, I would be more offended by it than somebody that does. But anyway,
and I had zero issue with it.
I figured.
Yeah.
But Coral could also attest to this. If you're out in the country like that in rural Texas, some coyotes are going to eat that pig. It's not going to still be there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I am 3 hours from Houston.
Yeah.
That pig would not be there that long.
No. Like, honestly, it probably wouldn't have made it like 2 or 3 hours, because as close as she is to the woods, I'm surprised how Thanos, whatever the gator's name is, I'm surprised she didn't crawl her ass up there and eat that damn pig.
Or like a raccoon even. Like, there's so many things that would eat it. Yeah.
Something would have been in that.
Well, I mean, not to get like,
I have to nitpick,
but it feels like it's another layer of like how isolated they are, basically.
Well, sure, like, absolutely.
Nobody's going there, nothing's happening. It's like they're stuck in time.
Yeah.
That's why Pearl's so sad she doesn't have any raccoon friends.
See, if she had a possum to hang out with, killing would have happened. That duck.
I am honestly picturing Pearl holding a possum's arms and like spinning around.
Oh yeah, and you know what? I just had a vision of her smothering it.
Oh,
you know what I mean? So I'm like, maybe it's a good thing. Yeah,
maybe she would leave that one alive.
Yeah, she does seem to be
terrifying. Or was it a duck? I guess it was a duck, but she called it Mr. Goose, didn't she?
Or Goose. Okay, I was about to say, like, she seems to be a lover of animals, except for the bird and the goose. So I don't know, is it foul? Maybe it's just foul animals.
I don't like birds, and I don't blame her.
Don't fuck with birds. Fuck with birds. Call me Pearl.
It's funny that you bring up the food part, because even before, when we were talking about how good the stew and everything looked, when I said all the food looked great, I legitimately was thinking about that scene too. And just like the beautiful dishes that they were using, even though there was these spots of mold on certain parts of the food, but it didn't matter, because again, like the color palette, just, it really actually did make everything look so gorgeous. So
yeah, I mean, for sure. That's one of the reasons why I do love this film. And, I mentioned, it's just like the colors in it are just fucking magnificent. Like, especially when she's doing her number at the church, like the reds and the blues and like all of that was just so. I'm not being patriotic. I'm just saying they were looking very pretty.
All of them pop. Yeah. I mean, it's for me, every time, I mean, I know it's the beginning of the movie, so it's a little bit different, but that first shot when the gate opens on the barn, it feels like we're doing the black and white to color of the Wizard of Oz. Like that is so reminiscent.
Yeah.
So, okay, Abby, what's a favorite moment for you?
Oh, I should have been thinking. I wasn't thinking while I was really into all of your ideas here.
Well, Coral, do you have
you know,
one? We could let Abby keep thinking.
Yeah, so I think that I think that my I have two favorites, and that's the opening scene, because that's kind of everything I wanted from the movie, just from the previews. You get the melodrama, you get the music, you get the Technicolor.
Yeah.
And so that was, everything I was looking for. And then the second one is the projectionist death scene, just because I was getting so anxious through the whole thing. And I was like, I knew there was no way he was getting out of there. And I honestly felt bad for him, because Pearl was pretty unhinged and he had every right to be anxious and wanting to get out of there. But then I also felt Pearl's anger, like we talked about. Like, I understand what it's like to be in those situations, and you kind of know you did something wrong, but you also are a little bit like projecting your anger, but then also you're still a little bit confused on like, how could I have done this better? And so I felt so many emotions during that. So that for emotion, and then the beginning scene, the opening credits for what I was wanting the whole movie to be.
Yeah.
Wasn't it great that it opened the same way, just coming through the barn door and the barn door open? Like that made me so happy.
Yeah. I was going to say, Coral, this is why I got the mind of a 3-year-old, I swear. Oh, also what you were saying with the emotion in that scene with the projectionist, also there's that, I mean, I think like we talked about, we've all been there, but like there was also that deep like pain I felt where you also don't understand what you did wrong, because it's like you thought you were picking up on the cues, you thought you were picking up on, and maybe you had some distorted like at the actuality versus what you had in your mind. Like that can be such a letdown, and especially if you're have a murder streak in you, then you're also going to like have some casualties from this. But yeah, like I guess it's funny. Okay, the more I talk about this, I'm such a flake. The more I talk about this, more I'm like, well, I had sympathetic parts for Pearl. Like but sure, by the end of it, I was like, I don't necessarily feel that sympathetic, towards her. But it's very interesting, because as I'm recalling these moments in these scenes, I'm like, well, shit, I did feel sympathetic for her in this. Like, what are you talking about? But I did. I left the theater being like, well, that's Pearl. You know what I mean? Like,
Pearl's gonna pearl.
Pearl gonna pearl.
I kind of want to circle back. Earlier we were talking about sympathy for Pearl, and something that popped into my head, but I never had a chance to bring it up, was that Pearl did not make me have more sympathy for Pearl and X. I thought I was going to leave feeling more sympathy for Pearl and X. It didn't change how sympathetic I felt for her in X. I didn't feel less or more, but it just stayed exactly the same, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe this isn't gonna be my favorite part, but I think it's my favorite aspect of the two movies. Like, I agree with Coral. I don't feel any more sympathy to Pearl in X, but I do feel more like tragedy, like, because we know what she wanted her whole life. And we also know that at some point, it could be right when Howard walked in that door, she chose to settle, right? And she said, okay, well, this is what it's going to be. And it's going to be the two of us murdering people at this farm that is the only place I wanted to get out of. And it doesn't make me feel sympathetic, but at the same time, it makes me feel a lot of something, right?
Totally agree.
Yeah, again, it's why.
Go ahead, Abby.
I was just gonna say, it's why I left that theater being like, well,
Pearl go Pearl,
that was
right?
that. Pearl come Pearl.
Yeah. I think there's something about the age that Pearl is at in X that feels pretty hopeless at that point,
Mhm.
I
right?
think that's what I
Like,
really think that's what
Paul is pretty much lost. I mean, we know she doesn't survive anyways, but she's unfortunately, yeah, at an age where like nothing can really be turned around anymore.
Mhm.
right.
Like Pearl probably could have got away with it, just given the time that all of that took place, and if she had just hightailed it out of there and never looked back, but
Mhm.
not anymore. Not by the time, or not when we first meet her in X. So
Mhm.
it
Right.
definitely, I think it feels more sad.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, okay, so did you know that was your fave aspect, so that's what you're going with for
Yeah.
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 No, that makes sense though. Well, anything else that you guys wanted to touch on in terms of Pearl? Because I know maybe we wanted to discuss a little bit about our thoughts around Maxine, the sequel that's coming out. And then if we have time, I kind of just wanted to ask you what other horror you've been watching and maybe like what your favorite horror of the year is. But we're good on Pearl, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so then Maxine, anybody have, I know we've shared like a couple of ideas in our group chat, but anybody want to speculate? Wild.
So how does she get
speculation?
away with it? How do people are going to think she murdered everyone? So
Oh,
that's my
interesting.
big thing. She's the
Huh.
only survivor and there's a bunch of dead people.
Yeah.
How does it not pinned on her?
Hmm. That's
a
very
good
good.
question.
I'm gonna be honest.
I
I
had not thought about that.
I was literally about to say I have not even thought about that, and I'll tell you why. Because I was so blown straight out of the way, but in a good way, at like what I perceive as the difference between X and Pearl, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know what direction or what they're going
Yeah.
choices are going to be made for Maxine. And I've always said this, but like I don't like I will watch trailers, but just the teaser, like not even a full trailer. Like when it comes out, it says full trailer is finally out. I'm like, no, I got enough from the teaser to know if I want to watch it or not, because they give away so many things. Like I'm really hoping that they don't do that. Like with, I don't feel like they've done it with X or with Pearl to a certain degree. Pearl just came out differently than we all expected. So I'm hoping that they will continue that with Maxine, because to be honest, I kind of want to go into it blind given my experience with Pearl, right? Like I don't disagree that it was very different than I thought it was. It just happened to be something I enjoyed differently, right? But so I don't know. Like I just don't want to go into Maxine and be like, okay, so we're in a pandemic, like Spanish influenza. She's isolated in LA. You know what I mean? Like or is it going to be like more of what we saw in X? Or we obviously know the time period is going to be different, right? It's going to be more 80s. So I'm fairly certain that like it'll be shot in some kind of 80s homage as well. Like these two films were shot to the time period, but just makes me very curious to see, is this going to be a slasher, or is this going to be like kind of like along the lines of Pearl, where it's just like Maxine.
And I don't remember where I heard this, so maybe it was you all saying this. I can't remember, but someone was saying, maybe we could expect, or it's a possibility that this might be more of a thriller / like sleuth, like very 80s like detective. And I think that's where that's where I want to stop it. Like I'm like, that would be cool if that happened. I think that we will see a different genre. I don't, right, just like, or at least the genre bending that we've seen with Pearl. I don't think we're going to get another slasher. I don't think we're going to get whatever the hell Pearl was. I don't even know. But yeah, like I'm the
vignettes?
same,
No.
right?
don't
I'm the same. Like this whole horror season, I have not watched any trailers except for Halloween Ends, and I wish that I did not.
Yes.
And so I'm going to go into Maxine hopefully the same way. Like that was the thing with Halloween Ends. I was like, I gotta see it like the day it comes out because otherwise it's just going to get ruined, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And it is when you get invested in well, this trilogy, which I feel we're quite invested at this point, like I it doesn't matter to me what it's going to be. I'm excited to see what it is. So
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think if nothing else, Pearl taught us to let go of any expectations and just be open to whatever this team wants to bring us and whatever story they want to tell. I think it would be, I think it's probably smart to think about what kind of stuff was popular in the mid 80s. Maybe not necessarily even just within like horror, like the horroriest of horror stuff, but like other genres that were very popular, because we can look at Pearl and pick, I mean, just the Wizard of Oz itself is like, that's
right.
that Pearl is of that time. We can do Texas Chainsaw with X and think about like how influential Wizard of Oz and Texas Chainsaw were to those eras, and maybe look to the 80s. And I don't even know what it would be, but if we wanted to like go further, I think that might be like a good path to go down to try and like figure it out. I also I'm not worried. Like I'm excited. It's Mia Goth. Like I'm not, it's gonna be great. So Coral, I don't know if you have any wild speculations, but
I don't, and I'm not very familiar with West outside of these two movies. I don't know if he's done anything that isn't horror.
I've only seen one other movie. I just watched it, I think on Halloween actually, House of the Devil, which is from the early 2000s, which was also not what I thought it was going to be. So this director continues to just do stuff that cannot be anticipated, which is really cool. So and then speaking of other horror, I just wanted to know, like, what's everybody's favorite film so far 2022? And let's take Pearl and X out of it.
Okay.
So
mine's going to be Hellraiser 2022.
Oh, okay.
It was
Your
on
favorite
Hulu.
franchise.
My favorite franchise. Okay, and it's funny because a lot of the themes that we've talked about for Pearl, like sexuality and a pain and all of these types of things, like I feel like those are themes in Hellraiser as well. So like obviously I'm drawn to, if it's not a slasher, like I think a specific tale that's being told in a story. But I was very pleased. I was super excited, but a little nervous, to be honest, about the reboot of Hellraiser, because it has got 11 movies. And so after so many, you're like, I'm not really, I think you and I talked about this, Jasmine, because you watched it.
Yeah, I think I'm just remembering that you told me it was 11 movies, though.
Yeah, and I was like, you really just watched Hellraiser 2. It's a really one of the best sequels. And then after that, you don't really need to watch anything else. But the reboot was
the new one I should check out.
And then the reboot, it was just phenomenal. The actress that plays Pinhead, or like the lead Cenobite, just phenomenal. And really brought to life what I felt when I read the books that Hellraiser is based on. So yeah, it was a really a welcomed surprise, you know what I mean? Because I like I said, I did go into a little nervous, but it was great. And so that's what no, it wasn't Halloween Ends, I'm so sorry, but that was my favorite of the year. So
well, you said that like it might be Abby's.
No. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't mean that against Abby. I'm just saying, like, people are probably think of me and they're like, oh, because I love Halloween and Michael Myers so much.
Right.
But no,
right. I don't mean you were like throwing shade or anything.
Oh yeah.
On my Zoom screen, it also looked like you were like, I know it might be yours, Abby. Like the way that you look.
I don't know if it is Abby's or not. I'm very excited to see.
Well,
Oh, I guess uh so it's like a three-way tie for me, but one just scooches out a little bit further, and that's Nope. I love Nope.
Oh
I
gosh,
thought
we
that
could have
that
done
was,
that. Yes.
I didn't even think
you
about
know,
that.
like, and it wasn't, there's a lot of people that are like, well, that's not really a horror movie. It's like, well, it was fucking terrifying.
was scary.
Yes,
So
it's a horror movie. I was
It's-
very scared.
It's a
right,
horror movie. If you
right.
don't fuck with aliens, that's a horror movie. Okay.
Right. And then I would also like just inches behind, I would say Halloween Ends and Barbarian are
Ooh.
probably tied. Like, I love them both so much. And as a trilogy in itself, I love these three movies as well as Pearl, as well as X. Like, I just love this sort of femme center that
Mhm.
horror took this year, because we got this like these richer stories and themes, and things were still gruesome and disgusting and full of like really great kills, but we also saw like blogs and YouTube and reviewers talking about trauma and talking about PTSD and talking about sexuality, and in ways that I know lots of people do within the horror community, but this was like these were mainstream topics. And I guess that's not so much with Nope, but I still felt like M. Haywood was my favorite character of the entire year. I love how strong she was. I love the brother sister bond
Yeah.
that was there. And again, right, there's all these like tender moments that have been sort of built into all of the horror this year, and I love it. Love it, love it,
Okay.
love it.
I want to tie that Barbarian with Hellraiser, because I just watched it like what, Jasmine, maybe not even a week ago.
Yeah, I mean, I
So-
watched it like a week ago. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was really loving Barbarian at when it was all
Mhm.
said and done. I was like, shit, that was good. So
I clapped. I loved it.
I think I texted this to you, Mels, but it's a tie of it's Barbarian and X are my faves of the year. Like Barbarian blew me straight out the way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Coral and I talked about this before, but it's so hard to explain to somebody what it's about without giving anything away, without spoiling it. And it's hard to talk about what it is anyway, because it's another one of those things that kind of not defies expectation, but if you don't see a trailer, and actually even if you do, because I watched the trailer afterwards and I feel like it's not that. Like
Yeah.
it does
No.
completely
This
different.
is how you do a
so-
trailer.
Yes.
For a horror.
I saw the trailer so many times because, like I said, I had the Alamo Fast Pass, and I was still, I
Right.
thought Justin Long's character was going to be completely different.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
not know it was going to take a turn like it did. The trailer did
right.
not give anything away.
Yeah, it was oh my God, it's so good. Like, I want to talk about that movie next because
Yeah.
there's
Same.
so much to talk about with that
Same.
movie.
Yeah.
You like bringing like sexuality and misogyny and privilege and all of these themes to a mainstream audience.
Mhm.
Perfect.
And right, like the way that it played with horror tropes and our expectations, and then just
Yes.
totally flipped it on its
Yes.
head, right? And still managed to say like, hey, but also look at how shitty all of these people were, these men were, right? Like,
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
it was so good.
Different levels
Yeah.
of shitty men being shitty and the
Mhm.
patriarchy sucking. Yeah, it was great.
And creating
Patriarch be
monsters out of
patriarching.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Coral, how about you?
So I'm probably, well, I know I'm the only one in this group that was not someone that would consider themselves a horror fan before this fall season. And then, I got the Alamo
Actually,
Fast Pass and I had so many reasons to go see the movies. So I started with Nope, and then I saw Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. And then I saw Pearl was coming out. So I watched X, and then I watched Pearl, and then I watched Barbarian. And I am now a huge horror fan.
Yeah.
And if a comedian writes horror, because Barbarian was written by someone from The Whitest Kid You Know, and then
Yes.
Jordan Peele, of course. If a comedian writes horror, I'm there. I'm first night.
They
for
get it.
now for the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
so I think I would have said no, or Right after seeing Barbarian, I probably would have said Nope was my favorite, but the more I've had to sit with Barbarian, the more it's become my favorite movie of the year.
Yeah. It's so good. I really did like Bodies, Bodies, Bodies as well, because that was something that was also unexpected. Like
They didn't,
really
the
didn't
preview
see-
didn't do
Yeah.
it justice.
and a lot of people are really upset with it. And I'm like, you need to rewatch and rethink this stance because I feel like you're missing something. Like it's, I don't know. I like the different stance that it took.
Would you consider it horror? Because I see it more like a whodunit kind of movie.
Yes. Yeah.
With horror elements.
I heard somebody say that it is, was it you that it's Clue for Gen Z?
No, but I love that.
Like that's pretty much what it is. It has horror elements for sure. Like without a doubt, it has slashery elements, but yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it's horror, as I've been saying this whole time.
Horror.
Have you guys seen that one?
I have not.
I
but
have
now I
not,
want
no.
to. Yeah, now I want to see it even more.
I believe
I'm sitting here thinking maybe I should have said "Don't Worry, Darling" was my favorite horror. I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh, Mills, I was gonna have to like fly to Nevada and like just I don't know.
Sorry.
No, it took her 4 days to get through it.
It took me 4 days to finish
Oh yeah,
the damn
duh.
movie. And I'm telling you, like
mean, that is
every
Pitiful.
every time my brain was like give up and I paused it and exited out, like my brain would be like, just be all
Just
right,
don't go
fine.
back.
There's 27 minutes left. You got this. So like
I
the
mean, I
next
was
day-
horrified by how bad it was.
It
So
was
it is
awful.
kind of a horror in that way.
I know, like it's a personal tragedy horror that I won't get that 2.5 hours back in my life. I mean, listen, now I understand why Harry Styles had to spit on Chris Pine and cause the uproar because I wasn't understanding it the whole
That's what I
time.
was saying. That whole thing was way more exciting than the movie was ever going to
That's
be.
what I'm telling you, like they were like, we got to have a stunt. Oh, Nick Kroll kissing Harry Styles isn't enough. I need you to go in and spit on Chris Pine. Okay, we got to get this movie, number one. Awful. Oh my god. Oh,
This has
Florence
been-
Pugh giving everybody the finger down the red carpet ain't enough. Get in there and spit on somebody. It's COVID times. Everybody will be
I mean,
horrified.
Did you guys see that though? Like while the press was happening, like people were like, there was a meme or something going around that was saying like, "This is the movie." There
Well,
is no movie. You guys are being
Yeah.
tough. Like,
Would
this
have been
is
better.
the movie.
That was better. Yeah,
It would have been better.
the premiere was
Watching
better.
paint
whatever
dry
it
would have
was.
been better.
Ooh,
Yeah.
boy,
Not gonna click
it
on
was
it.
it
Not
was
gonna-
terrible. Whew, okay, sorry, had to do that.
Well, this has not been terrible. This has been a lot of
Oh,
fun.
I know.
This has been a treat.
We
This has
should
been
cover
great.
more horror movies together. This was such a fun conversation. Thanks for watching.
Bye bye.